Hey everyone, I'm Devon, your friendly neighborhood board gamer, and this is Devon Talks Tabletop, the YouTube channel where the games are made up. What I say doesn't matter. And incoming soon, we have our very own Devon Talks Tabletop theme song, sung by the one, the only, Alex Radcliffe from BoardGameCo.
Whether it's Marvel United or the how's it go again? Whether it's Marvel United or the hamster cult, is he a grown-ass child or an immature adult? You know it's Devon. Devon talks tabletop.
And we are going to get a official studio to record this in, and we're going to get the one and the only Dr. Dre to do the sound producing and music production on it. So can't wait for that. Can't wait for that. It's gonna be a hit. It's gonna be a banger, club banger, as the men who have had families for the last 12 years and have never been to a club in the last 12 years can attest, right? Can't we attest
I've
to
been
that,
to a
Alex?
club. It was the singular worst experience I've had in the past like 2 or 3 years was being to a club. It is not my thing.
They don't have any board games at the clubs.
There's no board games. There's people looking like they're having fun, but I don't understand which part of the things that they're doing are they having fun, which is very confusing to me.
My goodness. When we were at PAX Unplugged last year, I was with my brother and my cousin came with us, and the three of us, and then also Jeremy Howard, were trying to find a place to watch the UFC fight. And the first place we found that looked like it would work was this nicer club that inexplicably was also showing the fight. And so we went there, and it was definitely a high-end bar club scene that in the beginning of the evening catered to an adult crowd and served good food. And as soon as it hit a certain point in the evening, shifted to obnoxious, like, bottle service college kids.
Oh
And
wow. Sounds like the worst.
it was rough. We ended up exiting as quickly as possible after we got kicked out because we were no longer paying. We weren't paying for bottle service like the kids were.
Yeah, I hear you. A UFC fight, that's something I'd definitely be interested in. You're right. It's not just board games for me. No, you're right. A UFC fight and board games. Uh-huh.
This is the longest pre-roll, and now we can just start what the video actually is.
So Devin, what is this video?
This is first impressions on Dune, War for Arrakis, Harkonnen versus Atreides, the story of the Baron versus Muad'Dib, the introduction of the Spacing Guild, Part 1, the finale.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That is indeed the first impressions video of
You
this
gotta go
episode.
watch Alex's video to understand the context of that absurd name. Gameplay
I
is
don't
gonna
think
be
any
up on his
context
channel.
matters. Yeah, but there's a gameplay over on my channel. You can check that out. There's a gameplay for Dune, the War for Arrakis, etc., 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 etc. And you can check that out with Devin and myself. And Devin, I believe you have 2.5 plays under your belt. I have 1.5 plays under my belt.
Mhm.
You've played War of the Ring. I have
Yep.
not played the War of the Ring. Just so everyone understands the full context of the wild amounts of experience we're walking into this with. But with that said, we're here to talk about our first impressions. Our first impressions of Dune.
And you would not give me any teasers after our game. You refused to. So I would like to start off by knowing. I got half of a smidge of a teaser. So I would
Yes.
want to know let's do pros and cons, and we'll switch off. What are your cons? Like, what are the things that for you are detractors for this game?
Sure. So detractors for this game. So high level overview of the game first. Dune War for Arrakis is an area control game, seemingly designed primarily around a 2-player experience, although with the ability to modify it to be a 3 or 4-player experience. But it's
I
basically
would
two
only do
sides.
two. Yeah.
That's my instinct, but I haven't played it the other way, so I'm instinctively I'm with you. But yeah, it's a 2-player area control game, highly asymmetric, in which you're going to be using dice as your methods of taking activations back and forth, as you put new units onto the board, as you play cards, as you navigate and maneuver units around the board, and ultimately try to take down your opponent, accomplishing your own specific unique goals, unique to your faction. That's the high level overview. You can check out our reviews, you can check out our gameplay, or any other content for more information from that. But as far as my cons, starting off with the things I did not like.
Losing? I'm just kidding.
Whoa. No, I was comfortable with that, especially when you consider how obviously I would have won if it was in person, not TTS.
Yes.
But that's another conversation.
Yeah, 100%. I give it that. I
But
give that back to you.
But I would say that there's a few things that I'm walking in as far as things I would potentially want to see done differently. Potentially, the first is I would say you're very often on the tradie side of the board, you had these goal cards to go for that gave you ways of getting extra points towards your victory goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't really feel like I had a lot of agency as far as being able to get in your way on those. So like
Mm.
that's one thing offhand where it's like, and maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that's just really about your own little puzzle. Maybe it's about your economy of the game as far as whether you commit energy there or commit energy stopping me. Maybe. But I would have loved to see a drop more agency in the way I could sit there and say, I'm going to try to get more points myself towards the victory. Or alternatively, I'm going to spend a little bit of extra energy this turn to just stop you from getting that 3 point card. And most of the time, it's just kind of felt like it's just a timer on the game. It's a timer that's a little bit random in the way it comes out. It's a little bit random in whether you can accomplish them or not, or this turn
Mm-hmm.
or another turn. But I didn't feel a sense of agency around that, and that would be, I'd say, would be my first complaint.
Mm-hmm. I do think that if I recall correctly, I am under the impression that I think the Spacing Guild expansion is supposed to, part of it is supposed to address some of that. Is supposed to
Interesting.
address the Harkonnen's player ability to maybe interfere with some prescience cards. I'm not 100%, but I do recall that a little bit. I would say for me, I'm trying to think of, this is the difficult part where I'm trying to think of things I didn't like.
You have nothing you didn't like? Come on,
no,
dude. Try a little harder.
no, so it's not that I don't have anything that I didn't like. It's that I am, in my experience, I am immediately comparing this to my very fresh and very recent play of War of the Rings. And so in those comparisons, there are quite a few things that I really do like a lot, and those have been like largely in my consciousness right now, like focusing on how I like what the designers, because the designers are from War of the Ring. That's why Alex brought it up at the beginning of the video. And so I see that pedigree of design that comes from War of the Ring over to this. I would probably say, having played as the Atreides the whole time now and not as Harkonnen, I
And
would
for me, the
also
reverse. I've only played as a Harkonnen.
I would also agree with you that the prescience cards I anticipate would be a frustration point for me, because like in our particular game, we were very close throughout all of the game, and there were different circumstances in which each of us could have potentially won at different times prior to the end of the game. There were ways in which things could have shifted and been in balance, and as you mentioned, there were times in which you could have taken the victory. But I would say that out of all of that, everything that we were doing, we were able to directly influence what the other was going after, except
Yeah.
for the prescience cards.
Yeah.
And like your extra thing as the Harkonnen, in addition to your full,
Well,
large.
the only pressure I could apply is making you so focused on defensive aspects that you're
Mhm.
not willing to commit any extra resources towards that.
Yeah,
That's the closest, and that's very,
yeah.
very loose.
But what I'm saying though is that besides your goal and mission to grow forces and expand out, the other thing that you have to account for that can help or hurt you is the Spice Must Flow chart. And that Spice Must Flow player board relates to your spice production. So that's your little extra thing. And I'm able to influence that by messing with spice production, messing with
Yes,
harvesters.
yeah.
But my side thing, which is the prescience cards and the growth towards that, you're not really able to affect as much. And I haven't experienced the absence of that agency from the Harkonnen side as having played the player Atreides. So I think that would probably bug me because I like being able to directly impact what another player is doing. And there were times in which I didn't feel that in War of the Ring. The 2-player game that I play the most, that I feel like I can pretty much always influence someone, is Star Wars Rebellion, and that's why that's one of my favorite ones. Is no matter the asymmetry and the difference in what people are able to accomplish as the Empire versus the Resistance or versus the Rebellion. I feel like no matter what side I am, I'm directly able to meddle with the affairs of the other player. And the prescience cards are, yes, I'm going to have to probably agree with you, because if I played the Harkonnen, like you just suddenly getting to victory based off of a card that I don't have any effect over would bug the crap out of me.
Yeah, and if you treat it like a timer on the game to an extent, it's not the end of the world. It's not. I don't hate it. I don't love it either.
Yeah.
And speaking of other things I don't love, and I didn't mind it. It wasn't the worst, but it
Hmm.
certainly wasn't impressive. I didn't find the dice combat to be that rewarding. I found it
Mm.
to be not bad. It wasn't bad, but I also don't feel there were significant degrees of agency over it. You're rolling dice and then seeing what the results are, and then there's a little bit more complicatedness to how exactly that plays out to make it not just seem like it's a question of rolling fives and sixes and the like. But I didn't feel there was particular nuance in the way I roll dice. It was just me rolling dice with the game adding its own level of rules around that system to make it not just seem like high rolls or better rolls, but it still comes down to better rolls for the most part. There's not
Yeah.
really agency. The only agency is whether you can discard a card to roll extra dice. But yeah, I didn't find the dice system, the dice combat to be rewarding. It didn't bother me. I didn't walk away from it thinking, oh my gosh, I hate this system. But
Yeah.
when I'm thinking of games that have interesting combat systems, Dune is not going to fit into that category.
Yeah, no. So the combat for me is in a weird space because I agree. I ultimately agree with you. I'm again coming from the comparison of War of the Ring. I truly dislike how that system works. It In a regular combat, you get hits on five and sixes. If you're going up against a stronghold in War of the Ring, and in this it would be a settlement, either a siege or like a regular kind of city, um, it's that you just have to get like they add dice, but they don't change how you get a hit. Um, and so I like it in comparison to like what its predecessor or what its forebear has done previously.
Sure.
Um, I like it in that sense, and I think it is a better system than that. But if you like, you're right. If you're talking about more elegant systems, for me, I know that you haven't played a full game with me yet. I know that you've played in the past a full game, but for me, Forbidden Stars, like it has a dice system. It has attack. It has defense. It has morale, though, as well. And then it goes over the course of 3 rounds, and you have successive rounds after which you measure stuff. And then you also have the cards, which are huge and manipulate the dice and add in other stuff and mess with the units. And so if I'm thinking about something that uses dice but has a more elegant way of resolving things other than just the presence of the dice, then
Yeah.
yes, this is lackluster compared to some other ones. I do think that in the one of the reasons why when I get to pros is I think that this game more than War of the Ring and more than other games that might be similar to it can play faster, which to me means it will get tabled more often. And so even though the dice isn't as robust of a mechanic in this game, I do think it actually helps to facilitate the speed of play, even if it loses some charm there. But I do agree, comparatively, I like it more than War of the Ring, but also like holistically in terms of how I view other games that do dice for combat, it is less refined maybe.
Cool. And I'm all done. That's everything I have.
Okay, all right. Well then, guys, this has been First Impressions for
Thanks
Dune
so
War
much,
of the
everyone,
Ring.
for tuning in. This is Devon Talks Tabletop, where the games are made up and what we say doesn't matter.
So true. So Alex, I want to get to the part now where you tell me what you like.
Oh, what I like. Oh, okay, that's more interesting. Cool, cool, cool. So, what I like about this game, that is significantly easier. So I mean, I could try to think about it more critically, but realistically speaking, when I was thinking through and reflecting over our gameplays, those are the only two real things I have that I didn't love about the system.
Hmm.
Now, whether or not this game is the right fit for you is a different conversation. We can get into that in final thoughts, but I like the system overall, and those are the things I reflected upon as things that I didn't love. As far as what I like, I can rattle things off left, right, and center, but I'll let you actually have time to talk in between things because I think that's only polite. It's your channel. But I'll start off with the fact that I heavily
They're
enjoyed.
used to watching an empty chair. They don't necessarily need me to be here.
Oh, you can go to sleep, turn off your lights. I'll take the show. I've
Sounds
seen your
good.
videos.
All right, I'll put the
Um,
cover on.
Exactly. So I heavily enjoyed the asymmetric nature of the game offhand. When you dive into a game this asymmetric, there's always a risk of any number of things going wrong. And I
Hmm.
just felt that the balance in the tug of war was very, very much present. I felt that that House Harkonnen had the clear edge on the military strength, but Atreides had a bit more tricks up its sleeve as far as both the unknown aspect, as far as those prescience cards, as far as the ways they can navigate. Their ability to jump across the desert on those sandworm tokens is incredible and gives them a very large leg up over Atreides, over Harkonnen once they get those up and running.
Yeah.
Whereas Conan has their own little tips and tricks as far as those ornithopters and the carryalls and the general, well, military might and more dice in general. And
I'm sorry. I
overall,
just every time you say the phrase tips and tricks, I'm just thinking of like of like, "Hi, House Harkonnen here to provide some tips and tricks on how to move about in the desert. Here is your ornithopter."
yeah, and so overall, I really appreciate the heavily asymmetric nature of the two sides of the game and how they really felt strongly in balance while they each sought to go after their own goals.
Gotcha. Okay. One for me, I think, is probably the just flexibility of movement is something that I immediately knew when I started reading the rules that I liked, and then absolutely when I started playing the game felt so satisfying. I think when you have like dudes on a map, sometimes it is it like depending on the game system, it can feel a little bit like stultifying, having to like move one adjacent area at a time. And different games have their ways around that. But I like how different the modes are for each player to resolve that. Like the idea that like if you just plan it out right over the course of a turn, the idea that a Atreides player could have units at the top of the map, and if they so choose to spend their turn bumping worm signs all the way around the map, that they could take a movement that is normally one area and literally just jump all the way across the entirety of the map using the sand riding, which, spoilers if you don't know how it functions in the movie or in the books or whatever, they ride the worms. They ride the sandworms on Dune with hooks, and they hook in and ride the worm across the desert. So the idea that you could have such effective movement. I mean, in our game, I used it to do a surprise attack against the Capitol. And then in other times, you can do it to get further stretches across the desert. And so that functions one way. You have to take certain actions, though, to set yourself up for that. So you have to intentionally take time. But the nice thing is that you can disguise those movements as both as also just protection of your sieges and of your locations, because worm signs, if a Harkonnen legion decides to move into them, can be revealed to be a sandworm. So I think what will be interesting going forward is actually either playing as House Harkonnen or going against it. If House Harkonnen notices that stuff and actually intentionally sends troops into worm sign tokens to disrupt movement paths.
Well, more than that, one thing you didn't get to see a lot of is there's a decent amount of cards in my hand, in the House Harkonnen's hand, that mess around with those tokens. And I would say, yes, that they get to take the tokens
Ooh,
off the board.
I like that.
Unfortunately, the times in which I have those cards and the times in which it was beneficial to play them never seemed to
Pan out.
properly match up. And then the one time when it probably was beneficial to play them, I had discarded like 5 cards in a combat that I did not win, hoping to win the game. So those cards do exist, and it lets you mess around with things. But yeah,
Yeah, no, and I think probably on the flip side of that, though, I really, really like the desert movement of the Atreides through the process of sand riding. But on the other side of that, the air sectors that House Harkonnen has, and how nimbly and sneakily you can move people around by hopping with ornithopters and like moving them to one section to where you use up that ornithopter, but then they're within the range of the next ornithopter, and you used that to great effect like 2 different times in the game. That completely flustered me, and I had no, I because I've been playing as House Atreides, I hadn't visualized the movement in that way, and it was so cool to watch like the flexibility on that end, because you were just like, oh, I have this terrifying legion, and I'm like, they're far away, and then it's like, no, they're not. They're right up your
and on
your
both counts, it's one of those things where I really enjoyed both sides of those things, both getting one over on you and then having you get one over on me.
yeah.
But it is also one of those things that, going to the whole nature of first impressions, it's one of those things that I wonder if that gets less fun as time goes on. I mean, the fact that as time goes on, perhaps we'll be able to see the patterns of what the other person is doing, such that you don't get those clever moments quite as often. If I can just see it, it's not a chess move, but there's something fun about getting one over on your opponent, and I wonder if that will go down as players are better against it against one another.
It potentially, like, the excitement of it working out will go through, but I think also, I think there will still be those surprises. But yes, you said chess, and I was thinking the same thing. I think it will be more, as players get more experience, it will be more chess moves. And then I think that the Spacing Guild, a couple of the things I saw in there, will enable that. And I think it's just going to come down to clever combinations of the planning cards and what's happening on the board, to where, like, I think it will be up to the players to create that those surprises. And yeah, like, it won't be as, ours were more like discovery of the game excitement. Yeah. And I think that this will be more like the excitement of a well executed plan coming together.
Completely agreed.
And so, yes, I enjoyed it, but I do think it will still be there, but maybe not in the same dopamine rush of like, oh, they didn't know that was going to happen.
And speaking of the planning cards, that would be another heavy thing that factors into both things. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, it's another thing I like, and it factors into that idea of being able to have those clever opportunities. Like, I really, really enjoyed my hands of planning cards. I thought that they were just powerful enough on a regular basis that they are compelling in your desire to draw them, in your desire to have them, and desire to use them, while not being so broken and overpowered that they're just like the whole game.
Yeah.
They are well timed. A planning card can mess with your opponent's plans, but again, not game breaking. It's not like, oh my gosh, there's 7 people on the board. No, yeah. It's like, oh, by the way, this squad gets reinforced with 3 people. Hey, this squad's going to go ahead and get a surprise attack and move when you thought they ought to move. Hey, we're going to go ahead and remove a bunch of your sandworm tokens, completely messing up your plan of moving across the desert. Yeah. There's a lot of small little ways the planning cards can give you edges. I really enjoyed watching both my hand and your hand of planning cards come to fruition.
Yes, I think actually one thing that you haven't mentioned but has come about indirectly is one of your frustration points or critiques centered around the prescience cards. And I think with regards to the prescience cards and to the planning cards and to the secret objectives of the Atreides, I feel like on the flip side of things, from when you were saying that as you play more, the surprises might happen less. But as you play more, you'll know all of those cards, and you'll also know the likelihood of what values the Atreides might be pushing for if they have not won yet. And so to me, if you think I'm going to get a big bump by having Lady Jessica, the Bene Gesserit, turn into Sayadina, like the Reverend Mother of the Fremen, you can try to remove her from the board and like get her out of there through an attack or something like that. And I think that there will be fun ways in which you can anticipate potential planning cards of your opponent, and also potentially figure out ways to go after your prescience cards or to stop the opponent's prescience cards, the more that you know. But I do agree. I like the planning decks a lot. I really have enjoyed it from just the 50% that I've been aware of. It's simply you saying, oh, Devon, I could have messed with this, this, and this, and you didn't even know. I'm like, ooh.
There's fun things. Lots of fun cards I did not get to play and or kept and or discarded for extra dice.
You got to bring in Thufir Hawat for such a long time.
Yeah, that was really impactful play. Yeah, really impactful play on my end. Yeah, but no, the planning cards, I thought they were absolutely excellent. As well as that, I overall enjoyed the general action selection system. Mm-hmm. I like rolling, as much as I have a problem with as much as I was not impressed by the rolling dice for combat, I very much did enjoy rolling dice for actions.
Yeah.
First of all, the small amount of mitigation you have, if you roll too many of the same, you could re-roll them. So that stops you from getting really bad rolls.
Yeah.
But past that, I liked almost every single action the game would let me take. And the puzzle of trying to say, okay, great, this is what I'm working with this turn. And they're all good. It's just a question of, does it work for your plans or not? Do you have to pivot or not? Do you have to rely on your planning cards more so than you have in the past or not?
Yeah.
All those questions are there. But the general action selection aspect of rolling dice and saying, okay, great, I have more movement this turn. I have more reinforcement this turn. I'm going to be popping a bunch of extra sand harvesters on the board, which are going to really help me as spice harvesters, which is going to help me get an extra dice on a regular basis because now you still have to deal with that. Mm-hmm. There's that constant juggling of everything is good, but which good thing are you going to
Everything
execute
is
on? And more
awesome.
than which good thing are you executing on, but which order are you going to execute on them too? The order is a big deal. Trying to stall out your opponent as you prep in different ways. The anticipation of, do you go for that early turn rush so you can start putting them on the defensive, or do you
Mhm.
hold on to your moves, forcing them to burn through their moves so that you can react and see what happens at the end of it? Lots of fun decisions as far as what you do, how you do it, and when you do it. And I just really enjoy the dice selection mechanism.
And I think that one of my favorite changes from the War of the Ring setup is the action dice and how that works, and your player board where you resolve those is the same as in War of the Ring. One of the key difference for me is that in War of the Ring, the Fellowship, which also has up to half the amount of dice, the mitigation in that one is that they can get other players in or other characters on the board that give them dice, like Aragorn or Gandalf the White and stuff like that. So they can increase their dice pool. What I like about this is that you can increase the dice pool as House Atreides, but you can always, if you have less unused dice than House Harkonnen, you can use the Desert Power action. And I felt like that was balanced enough. I felt like there were enough times in which I was able to use that successfully, and then also I used that to set up more powerful moves on my end. And I took those Desert Power actions early, and then as my dice became more even with the amount that you had left, and then also you can make a dice equivalency by really disrupting the spice production of House Harkonnen. So I really did like the dice action system that both players had, and I do agree with you that each of those actions feels meaningful, but especially the leader versions, the special versions that each like leader in play can give you, also feel just enough satisfying that you always want to try to use them when you can, because they give you that little nice extra edge. But you don't have to. You can always do the basic actions if you want to, and I like that choice and that freedom. I would say for me, there was something I was going to say. It was going to be so clever, so witty, so insightful. And
I
I
expect it.
remember it. Has to do with game length. This is 2 times now where I have played this game in its entirety on TTS, and we've finished in 2.5 hours. That is almost half of the amount of time it took me to play War of the Ring for the first time in person.
For the record, the second play was under 2 hours.
It was okay.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Yes, that's even better. That's even better for me. The idea that I could get a game like this, where its contemporaries, its parallels, are going to be War of the Ring, Star Wars Rebellion, and all of these cinematic, expansive two-player experiences. If on TTS I can play it in less than 2 hours, that means that 100% the 2 hour time mark that it gives on the campaign and on the box and stuff like that, that's accurate. And I am thoroughly excited by that because I feel like the other games, Twilight Imperium, even Forbidden Stars, and Star Wars Rebellion and War of the Ring, all of those are
Oh,
games
and
I
Twilight Struggle.
absolutely.
Don't forget Twilight Struggle, our favorite game.
I love that game.
Yeah.
Um, so all 4 of those games I have in my collection. I adore all of them, and anytime I can get them to the table, I'm excited. But I mean, if I can get Dune War for the Arrakis and I can play that game in the same amount of time as just a longer game of Dune Imperium, that is a compelling uh, that's a compelling point for me to be able to table this as quickly as I can. And it's also at a point in which I'm willing to forgive some of the small things, like you mentioned, like the dice not being as satisfying as it could be, or the prescience cards me not having as much effect. If I'm able to have, you know, 90% of what I want from this game in a 2 hour time span, that's a pretty big win for me.
Yeah. I
How
don't
do,
disagree at
how do
all.
you how do you feel about how time on your end?
Time online time wise, I really enjoyed what the game gave me, and again, roughly 2 hours of time. I thought that it was absolutely amazing in terms of giving you a very solid game. I think, like, I can't speak for War of the Ring, for example, but I can speak for Star Wars Rebellion is a great example. Star Wars Rebellion is a game that I thought was excellent, absolutely excellent.
Hmm.
But like every time I've played it, it's like 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
And that's just too long for the experience I'm getting out of it. What this game managed to do in roughly 2 hours, I thought was excellent. And I think, like, again, there is the aspect of balance setup and teardown, which we don't have in TTS, but I think you throw those into the mix. And even in the 2 hours, by the way, I'm not counting the fact that you spent like 10 minutes on a rules introduction for the audience and all that. So that goes into the setup and teardown and those factors.
It was a little bit
But
longer than your 60 seconds that you do.
it was, but perhaps clearer, perhaps clearer. And so
Perhaps
there's
clear.
I thought that the game time, what the game gave you in 2 hours, was very rewarding and very enjoyable. Like I thought it did a great job. It was compelling. I guess the overall context, and this shouldn't be a surprise at this point, but the overall context is I walked into this gameplay wondering, hey, sometimes I play. It's easy to be excited about a command campaign, and it's especially it's easy considering the fact that I know if I don't like it, I can sell it for what I paid. Who cares? But I'm not looking for that extra work, so I usually don't engage in it unless I actually like the game.
Yeah.
I walked into this campaign wondering whether I was going to be keeping my pledge at the end of this game. And I very much am keeping my pledge because I can see myself tabling this. I can see myself getting this played and enjoying myself in a very tight 2 hour experience that is highly rewarding, highly variable, highly engaging. And I guess speaking of which, I should touch upon, speaking of other things I enjoyed about the game, I really enjoyed the general risk reward that's present across every single thing you do in this game.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much push and pull risk reward strategy as far as everything you do, from the way from the way the Arconin are pushing out into the desert, knowing full well they might be able to put the Atreides on the defensive or maybe even get some early wins in. But once you're in the desert, you are also sitting there exposed. Do you spend your action dice to retreat back to the mountains so you're not being attacked by the worms and the harsh storms? Do you do that? Is that worth the economy of it all?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with the harvesters? Do you go for the deep desert where you can get more spice, but it's a little more likely you'll be sat down and targeted, taken out?
Yeah.
That push and pull is the present as well. In combat, do you give up extra cards because you might be able to win this combat, which absolutely could be a huge factor in the game? Or do you hold on to the cards because the cards are very useful in their own rights, and a card for a single dice seems like a terrible trade-off if it doesn't actually win you that battle?
Yeah.
And so there's constant push and pull, constant decisions you're making as far as what you're doing, how you're doing it. Do you buff up that troop before wandering into the desert, or do you wait? If you buff up the troop, you're effectively giving the opponent extra time to defend and to react to what you're doing. There's so much push and pull and so much trade-off and so much decision space around what basically is a game that starts off with, hey, you have a bunch of troops and you have a bunch of troops. Now go ahead and smack each other in the face until someone wins. That's what the game comes down to. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah.
I can see someone playing this game. I can see someone playing Dune War for Arrakis and saying, I don't get it. What am I doing? I wander, I march my troops into the desert, I attack you, we roll dice, ta-da, you win. Okay, great, you get a few presence cards. Like, where's the strategy? And I can completely see someone having that reaction, although I think they're wrong. I mean, even just from our two different games alone, just the drastically different approaches that we took in the way I pushed out, and the types of offense I took, and the opportunities to feel clever. It felt drastically different, despite having the exact same starting setup and the exact same, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. I really enjoyed that constant trade-off and the push and the pull and the strategic decisions you're making throughout the course of the game, and I just very, very rewarding.
Yarp.
Yarp indeed.
Yarp. Well, let's see. I'm gonna upset at least one BGG user.
Okay, good. Go for it.
And say that so I've only played War of the Ring one time. I've played it one time. So let's just get that qualification or clarification out into the open. I played it one time. I did enjoy it. I have 2 expansions. I have the Warriors of the Middle Earth. I have Lords of the Middle Earth. And I am excited to try those out. More so Lords than Warriors. But at the end of the day, there was some things that frustrated me. I was frustrated by how long a stronghold fight could take with a siege, because of how protracted that combat can be, and how unsatisfying, because it could take so long, how less and less satisfying the win was when it is burdensome for it to go down. I didn't like the fact that combat was 5s and 6s and then 6s during a siege. I was sometimes frustrated by the fact that the hidden token determination of whether the hunt for the Fellowship was based off of tokens, which no matter how much bad tokens I put in, I could just get bad luck, which I kind of did when I played. there were several things that made it to where I didn't feel like I had as much agency over some of the game mechanics as a player. And for a game that can take 3 to 6 hours, having those small frustrations over time made it to where I really liked the game, and I know that I will like it more the next time I play it than the first time I did. But it is still a lot to ask for such a lengthy gameplay. And there are other games I would rather play that either take as long, or other games that don't take as long, and I could play multiple iterations of them in the same amount of time frame. So for my experience with War of the Ring, and then coming here for Dune War for Arrakis, I felt like the combat was fixed for me, the troop movement was fixed for me, and just the experience that I wanted for War of the Ring was contracted, condensed, and made more dense and meaty and exciting in a shorter time frame. So kind of my instinctual determination right now is that I think this will get tabled vastly more frequently than War of the Ring, and because of that, it takes my vote. I feel like the amount of times where I'm going to be like, oh, I've got the kids gone for Saturday, let's do War of the Ring, or I'm going to be like, the kids are gone for Saturday, I'm going to do Dune War for Arrakis, eat lunch and watch a movie, all with the same friend. I'm probably going to pick the second version of that, just because I get more stuff done. And if I was with Alex, I would eschew lunch and I would not watch a movie and I would just watch 2 more games, because as I said those things, he immediately lost respect for me. And he's like, you missed out the opportunity for 2 more games, Devon. So if I was playing with Alex, I'd play Dune War for Arrakis, and then I'd play 2 more games at minimum. And
I was debating in the comments and I wasn't going to.
Afterwards, then I would remember that food existed in the world, and I would eat.
I still do food. It's the movie I was questioning. Yeah. Lunch I'm okay with.
It's a lunch I'm okay with. Lunch would be eating while setting up the next game. So
I'm in the fortunate position of not having played War of the Ring, which means I don't have to get on camera after 1.5 plays of this and say, I like it better than War of the Ring, and watch everyone go with, oh, Alex, come on. He likes the come on game more than War of the Ring. Of course he does.
No, it's okay. But I'll be the scapegoat for the both of us.
That said, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was excellent. I do question how much it gets tabled even at the 2-hour length. For me, this is not competing against War of the Ring. It's competing against games like Rum and Bones, for example, another come on title. It's competing against Antique Duellum. It's competing against, I'd have to look to
What's
see what
it like to have played other games that you can name in a conversation like this?
I don't even know. I have to look at the other 2-player longer games I have, but the genre of 2-player 2-hour 6 Siege is competing against 6 Siege from Mythic Games. I'm saying it's that genre of a 90 minutes to 2 hours for a 2-player head-to-head experience, and even that I find doesn't get tabled that often. But this will get tabled. How often, I don't know. Maybe it gets tabled 3 times a year. Maybe it gets tabled once a year. But it's going to get tabled because this is a really solid game that the back and forth and the asymmetric nature of what the game is offering and the puzzly degree of trying to figure out and the tools at your disposal. And there's so many tools. Do you use that ornithopter to reveal one of your sieges so I know where to focus my attention? Or do I actually use it to attack and potentially leave a 6 troop stranded in the desert by a 1 siege and not really being as effective as they need to be? There are so many decisions. No, it didn't. But that decision space, that one, yes, the decision space in this game is very vast considering what it otherwise seems like. And I really, really enjoyed that. I have no idea what the Spacing Guild expansion will actually add to the gameplay or not. If it adds things that I like, great. If not, not a problem at all. I won't play with it. I like the game as is. I thought the decision space, the action selection, the planning cards, the push and pull, the risk and reward of everything. There's just so many. I mean, one of the things I love about a game is when I can look back and think through, here's all the things I would have done differently. And from our first games, there's so much I would do differently. There's so much learning ahead on this game. There's so many opportunities still to sit there and figure out, okay, great, this is what I did do, but this is what I would do differently next time. The problem is I'm playing against you and you're also going to do things differently. so we're both in this new mind game of here's what we learned, here's how we're going to apply it, and I'm sure we'll find new opportunities to sneak up on each other, new opportunities to find tactical advantages, or to understand just that sandworms actually reach a distance of 2. That'll help too. That'll help as well.
One thing that I think will excite you that I know is that from the Spacing Guild, you can actually get a Spacing Guild navigator as House Harkonnen, and
Mhm.
they occupy a air zone. And essentially, what you can do is you can remove them to do kind of like a move anywhere on the board.
Mhm.
It's like they check the weather, and then you're able to go kind of like anywhere. So
Dude,
I was like, that would be uncomfortably brutal in Alex's hands.
so many
So
opportunities. There's a lot of
yeah,
opportunities. I really like this one. Like I'm not going to rate it after 1.5 plays, but I'll happily say that for me, this is a 4 at a minimum, more likely a 4.5,
yeah,
possibly a 5, but like that's way too early to say that.
yeah,
And I really think the dice combat, I wish the dice combat were a little bit, I wish there were more interesting decisions around the actual combat itself. Even just dice manipulation from the cards would potentially change things, but like I haven't seen any of that, unfortunately. And so I really like it. I really enjoy it. It is a solid game that, again, I'm coming at this with no War of the Ring experience. I am coming at it comparing it to a game. To me, the most closest comparison would be what's it called? Geez, we call it Star Wars Rebellion. The closest
mm,
comparison to me would be Star
yeah,
Wars Rebellion, and to me, this gave me a Star Wars Rebellion experience, but in nearly half the playtime, and that's compelling to me. That's
yeah.
compelling.
And for me, I don't normally rate things because I'm not an actually efficient YouTuber. But what I would probably say for me is after 2.5 plays, I'd likely give it an 8.5. I'd say it's an 8.5 out of 10 for me, and it's either going to stay steady right there, which is reputable enough on its own, or it's going to climb up to a 9, depending on successive plays, what the Spacing Guild and other things will influence. Like I could easily see this being, 9.5, just depending on how many times I'm able to get to the table and how, like, where we get to that point that Alex and I were talking about, where does it feel like you still get the excitement from a plan working out instead of in that substituting the discovery excitement that you get early on in beginning plays. And if that bears to be true, if that turns out to be true, then I think that this is going to increase from 8.5 to 9.5 for me. I really enjoyed it, and at the time that it comes in at, it kind of steals the thunder from quite a few games that are like it but take quite a bit longer to effectively table. So really good experience on my end. Can't wait to play more.
Yeah, completely agreed.
I might be doing a 16-hour live stream at some point, so we'll
Sounds
see.
like a plan. Wait, I just got that. Oh my gosh. For those who don't know, Devon has a thing where he's not allowed to buy any new games for an entire year.
I'm
And
like over 4 months in.
I put the pressure on. I said, well, what if you do? What if you do? What if you do? And he's doing a 16-hour live stream as the what if he does.
Yeah, hasn't happened yet, but it might.
Wow, so it's really
It
worth
might.
it. Good to know.
Yeah, yeah.
Good to know. In any case, yeah, that's all I have. That's all I have.
All right. Well, hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. This was Dune War for Arrakis. The
Conan versus Atreides, the Baron versus
Muad'Dib, the introduction of the Spacing Guild, Part 2, the finale. So,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a good one. If you have any questions, send them in the comments, and I'll make Alex do my comments for me because I got to catch up on all the other ones I haven't done yet.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, I'm not behind it all myself.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.